When you think of physics, what do you picture? Probably someone like Einstein, right? Standing at a chalkboard, just lost in the pure, quiet search for truth. But what happens when that world of pure thought slams into one of the biggest, messiest scandals of our time? Well, that's the strange connection we're going to unpack today.
There's this mythology around physics. We see it as something totally pure, completely untouched by the complicated, messy world we all live in. We imagine it's totally separate from things like money or politics or, well, scandal. But the reality, it's way more complex than that. And that complexity leads us to a really startling question. Why on earth do the names of so many respected scientists, physicists, researchers, you name it, show up in documents connected to Jeffrey Epstein? It seems like a totally bizarre crossover, but believe it or not, there's an explanation.
All right, so let's start by trying to untangle this puzzle. How did these two worlds, which seem galaxies apart, theoretical physics and a massive criminal investigation, how did they even get connected in the first place?
Okay, but before we dive in, it's super important to frame this the right way. This is not an explainer about guilt or innocence. It's a story about misunderstanding. It's about how the kind of boring, bureaucratic machinery of modern science can accidentally pull people into orbits they never ever chose to be in. To really get what I'm talking about, let's zoom in. Let's move from the big, abstract idea to a very specific human story. We're going to follow one physicist's journey to see exactly how this all plays out. So meet physicist Sabine Hossenfelder. She was shocked to find out her name was in the Epstein files. And where was it? It popped up in an email, sitting right there in his inbox. Now, on the surface, that sounds pretty alarming, right? But the real story is all in the context. So it turns out the email was sent way back in 2010 by a colleague of hers, another physicist named Lee Smolin. And he wasn't talking about anything sinister. He was literally just trying to get a speaking slot at a conference so he could argue against one of Hossenfelder's scientific papers. The whole thing was just about a professional academic debate. And this right here, this just perfectly illustrates the whole problem. The online speculation immediately jumps to, oh, there must be a direct personal connection. But the reality, her name was mentioned by someone else to a potential conference funder about a super niche debate in theoretical physics. The gap between what people assume and what actually happened is just massive. So what was this incredibly nerdy debate even about? Well, it was centered on something called deformed special relativity, or DSR. Basically, it was this highly theoretical attempt to kind of tweak Einstein's famous theory to try and solve a deep problem related to quantum gravity. See, Hossenfelder had looked into DSR and published a paper in a big journal basically arguing that the whole theory was, and I'm quoting here, mathematical nonsense. Her colleague, Lee Smolin, he was a big fan of the theory, and as he said in that email, he was working hard to try to find if there was a way around her argument. That's it. That's all it was. A good old-fashioned, passionate physics debate. And this one story, it's the perfect window into the much, much bigger picture. Because this isn't really about one email. It's about the entire system that keeps modern science running. Let's call it the funding machine. Despite its reputation for just being chalkboards and deep thoughts, theoretical physics is wildly expensive. We're talking about money for entire research institutes, for flying people around the world for conferences, for paying researchers, and all that money has to come from somewhere. And here's the key. The connection is almost never direct. It's administrative. It works like this. A wealthy donor gives money to an institution. That institution uses the money to host a conference. Then, a scientist who's probably never even heard of the donor gets invited to give a talk. And just like that, boom, their name is now on a document connected to that funding. And what are these documents? They're not some secret diary or a coded message. They're the most mundane paper trail you can imagine. We're talking about guests lists, travel itineraries for booking flights, boring logistical spreadsheets, and endless institutional email chains. It's just the bureaucratic background noise of organizing any big event. So what happens when this totally mundane paper trail gets released to the public, completely stripped of all that crucial context? Well, you get lost in a storm of speculation. I mean, in our world today, context just evaporates online. A name pulled from a spreadsheet, screenshotted, and posted on social media can circle the globe in minutes. It just ignites this firestorm of speculation. And all that nuance about administrative procedure, that's the first thing to get burned away.
So we have to be absolutely 100% crystal clear about this disconnect. Just because a name is in a document, that does not mean there was a personal relationship. Being on a guest list for an event does not mean you're complicit in anything. And having your name in a file for some bureaucratic reason absolutely, positively does not equal guilt.
And for the scientists who get caught in the middle of this, it creates this incredible weight of misunderstanding. They suddenly find themselves tangled up in a public drama that has absolutely nothing to do with their actual lives or their work, all because they were just doing their jobs, attending a conference, publishing a paper, just being a scientist.
And that really brings us full circle. It brings us back to the heart of the matter, to the real motivation that drives these people in the first place.
When she was explaining her side of the story, Sabine Hossenfelder said it perfectly. She just said, "I'm really just interested in physics." That one sentence, it just captures everything. These researchers aren't trying to navigate some complex social network of billionaires. They're just trying to figure out how the universe works. So, remember that mythology of pure science we talked about at the beginning? Maybe it isn't a total myth after all. The purity does exist. It's just not in the institutions or the funding systems. It's in the minds of the people who dedicate their entire lives to discovery, even when they have to navigate these messy, imperfect systems to do it.
And all of this leaves us with a really big and I think really important question for our time. In an age where a name on a list can become a verdict in the court of public opinion, how do we protect the truth and the people behind that truth from the crushing weight of misunderstanding? It's something we all really need to think about.